Hi, welcome back and thank you for staying with us. It's now time for our discussion. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has indefinitely suspended the chairman, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Abdul Rashid Bawa, from office. He said this is to allow for a thorough investigation into his conduct while in office, following weighty allegations of abuse of office against him. Now, this was contained in a statement by the Director of Information, Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Willie Bassi, on Wednesday. Now, meanwhile, the Department of State Services said it is interrogating the suspended chairman of the EFCC, and DSS spokesman Peter Afunanya, in a statement late Wednesday, said Bawa arrived at the office of the secret police and the invitation relates to some investigative activities concerning him. And right here in the studio, we have joining us a barrister Bode Fadigbe Esquire in the studio. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
And we also have Samaila Musa, a public commentator, to discuss the EFCC chairman suspension and matters arising. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Samaila.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's begin with you, Samaila Musa.
Yes.
Now, okay, but before we actually start with you, let's take a look at this particular report.
Like his predecessors in office, Abdul Rashid Bawa, the fifth in the series of chairmen of the anti-graft body, has come under executive hammer over allegation of abuse of office.
Anybody who is appointed to the EFCC will have to know that apart from fighting to keep his seat, he's also fighting against those people whose interest he goes against.
The fundamental question that comes in terms of reaction now would then be, what is the process? How do you carry on a process like that of fact-finding in a way that does not denigrate the powers of the Commission?
It has become a tradition for every president to appoint whoever he is comfortable with to head the EFCC, a powerful government agency charged with the responsibility of fighting against corruption in Nigeria. This, according to anti-corruption crusaders, weakens the agency's capacity, erodes public confidence in addition to making mockery of genuine interest to tackle the monster.
Appointments and the composition of EFCC and the experience and the functions it had has been politicized. And you see that even from the first EFCC boss we've had, it was to a large extent to go after perceived political opponents.
And that is not healthy, especially even from the perspective of public confidence. Because if you talk about the anti-corruption process, it is about state and society.
From the EFCC's pioneer chairman Nuhu Ribadu to Farida Waziri, Ibrahim Lamurde, Ibrahim Magu, and now Abdul Rashid Bawa, the story remains the same, as they were removed unceremoniously over similar allegations, accompanied with endless probes whose outcome have never been made public.
It is not just about Bawa. This has become a pattern, and we cannot, we can make no mistake about the fact that this is not good for the anti-corruption crusade. I'm talking about the politically exposed persons who may be within or outside government.
And I believe there are salient issues that have not come to light regarding why this is so. But we can only speculate that, there must be one or two things that is in the know of the authorities, which we do not know.
Though Nigeria continues to grapple with deepening and pervasive corruption in both public and private sectors, which undermines the nation's economic growth and development, anti-corruption crusaders believe a holistic review of the anti-graft agency to make it independent and result-oriented is desirable. Shafiu Suleiman, Trust TV News, Abuja.
All right, thank you, Shafiu, for that report. And now we still have Bode Fadigbe Esquire and Samaila Musa in the studio with us to, analyze and talk more on this particular topic of discussion. You're welcome once again, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so let's begin with you, Samaila Musa. Now, a lot of people actually have something or a thing or two to say about this suspension, but want to know, did it come as a surprise to you?
No, not at all. First, I think we need to commend President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Coming to office, he has displayed leadership, and leadership with strength. You know, the last time we ever experienced any kind of leadership with strength like this was during Obasanjo. What we've been seeing over time, especially the last 8 years, has been a very weak leadership, uninspiring leadership, not motivating to the youths, you know, where we see all manner of nonsense going on and the president seems to be looking the other way. And, you know, that's actually something that really took us back by like 20, 30 years. Bowers, even before Bowers' suspension, the moment he started with Emefiele, I felt, okay, perhaps we've started getting it right, because what we saw the last 8 years was no one single person was actually sacked for incompetence or for, you know, some kind of allegations that are actually weighty, you know. So Bowers' suspension, because we saw EFCC has become a tool in the hands of the cabals, and, you know, it's just like when you try to unleash your dog, you understand, after perceived enemies, they just tell him, go after this, go after that. Particularly, there's a cabal that is headed by Malami that is the only person who can point who EFCC goes after. You know, so it quite very sad. We experience very, because as a matter of fact, people are beginning to see it like, okay, if you don't want EFCC to investigate you or whatever, or come after you, make sure you are in Malami's good books.
That's a huge allegation.
It is a huge allegation. And I mean, I have lots of those here on this man, and I can tell you for a fact, there's somebody in prison now that was arrested because they were doing whistleblowing. Malami came on air and he denied he never met the guy. I personally knows that he knows him. He gave him Hilux to be using. I know the guy personally, and I knew when he was doing that work. You understand? This was a police officer that left the police. Later, we saw how the police came and denied that they never knew him. He was a police officer. He left. You know, so it's only when they are empowered that they can say all these kind of things. And because they know whoever wants to investigate them, have them to contend with. But now he's out of power. Let them come. We're going to prove all that. Let them go and bring Lawrence from Kuje prison and let him come and say the real truth of what happened.
All right, let's come back to you, Bode Fadigbe. Now, what is the legal implication of the, you know, of this particular suspension? Because a lot of they're actually saying the allegations are weighty. They're saying it's weighty. How momentous are the allegations, you know, leveled against Bauer?
Well, depending on the perspective they are coming from in terms of the weightiness of the allegation. I know clearly that the EFCC Act in terms of functions does provide for about 4 or 5 areas and then an omnibus area. It talks about economic and financial crimes. It talks about the failed banks. It talks about some other issues, terrorism, money laundering act. Those are the areas under which an infraction can attract the attention of the law. But interestingly enough, again, it also talks about the fact that EFCC has the power, because you want to ask, is it that Bauer was involved in financial crime with banks, or is it that Bauer was involved with the failure of a bank, or is it that Bauer was involved in money laundering or terrorism? These are 4 fundamental areas. But there is also an omnibus, 2 omnibus areas. One, the last one says EFCC can also take up matters that are provided for in the penal code and the criminal code. Now, the penal code and the criminal code under our criminal jurisprudence allows, takes care of criminal activities in the south and then criminal activities in the north. For the north, it is penal code, and the north will include all of those areas that we regard as the northern part of this country. North Central, Northeast, Northwest, all of those areas. And then, of course, the entire south. And, of course, we know the history of how we got to the point of having 2 different criminal codes for the country. But the point I actually want to make is that even if Bauer is not spotted in any of those other 4 areas, it can also be spotted under the criminal code or the penal code. but more clearly the penal code, because of where he is located. The penal code is located in the northern part of the country, but even at that, it could also come under the Administration of Criminal Justice Act. But in terms of worthiness of the allegations, even if it is financial issue alone, they are quite worthy, because the country took extra pains to pull out the EFCC from the penal code and the criminal code to set up a space. Because you remember that there was a time, and it's still here today, it has only changed name, we now call it Yahoo. Otherwise, in those days, it was 419, which is still prevalent. But it got to the point where it became a very embarrassing thing at the international level. Countries were even defrauded and things like that. So it became very necessary for Nigeria to demonstrate clearly that it was not in support of that kind of thing, and it was also hurting Nigeria. So the FCC came out of it. So if it is that financial crime alone is fundamental enough for Bauer to be brought under scrutiny, but for me, it's quite sad that the one who is supposed to be pursuing criminals, because it's a position of trust, it's a position of enormous responsibility. Quite sad, because he's now the one being investigated. It's a disappointment that somebody as young as that, in whom the country has invested a lot of confidence, because there is this quarrel that, oh, don't allow young people to be at the helm of strategic institutions. But the president took the risk of putting him there, and then see what has happened. I mean, I don't know how best, I don't know what other word I can use that is broadcast friendly, but I tell you the truth, it's quite disappointing that he would ever be spotted for criminal investigation. It shouldn't be heard about him at all. The day I read that Matawale was saying that he asked for $2 million bribe from him, I don't think Matawale at his level as a governor would be so reckless as to come to the public space, because he knows, he understands the law of defamation. At that level, he should understand that you don't just make some statements. So the day I read that Matawale accused the EFCC chairman of demanding for bribe, as a matter of fact, that was the day he ought to have been suspended.
But he actually denied it.
It's not enough to deny. You see, there are certain things that some people shouldn't say, and the moment they say it, will trigger the alarm. It's not enough to deny. As a matter of fact, if we were a country of people who have modicum of integrity, that same day he should put pen to paper, say, I step aside. You have made this allegation against me. Until it is clear that I am not involved, I step aside. Now, by the time it's investigated and they find out that he's not involved, he can then proceed to court and say, you have defamed me.
But Matawale didn't drop any receipt. It was just his words against Powers.
So, I didn't get that.
Matawale did not drop any receipt.
He didn't drop
evidence, you know, of saying this. It was here. I recollect something.
It's a very convenient exit path for me to say, oh, let him go and bring his evidence. Oh, he didn't produce any evidence. The mere fact that a governor will come out to say, this is what he demanded from me, that is enough evidence to trigger an investigation. It's enough evidence. And when you want to investigate somebody at that level, even in the mainstream civil service, the moment the system says you are accused of infraction concerning your office, the first thing that, depending on the gravity or the enormity of the offense, the first thing that the system does is to ask you to step aside. Why? So that you don't influence investigations. Why does the police put somebody in protective custody when they are doing investigation of certain level of criminal suspected criminal activity? It is because they don't want to put the witnesses and the pieces of evidence under immense pressure, such that they will not be able to get the facts that they are looking for.
Okay, Samaila Musa, yeah. I have a question for you.
Right.
So, Mr. Bawa is, as the second major appointee of the former President Muhammadu Buhari, who has been suspended, and people are seeing it. So, should I say, some Nigerians are seeing it as though it's a witch hunt, by the President Tinubu. Considering that during the election period, we saw situations where there was a bit of fraction in the APC, where people were saying some decisions that the former President Buhari was taking was not really favoring the incoming president, and people were thinking there might be a bit of cold blood or war against between them. So could it be that this is President Tinubu's way of hunting or taunting the former President Buhari? What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, you see, the way I say it, even if it's witch hunting, they call for it. You're supposed to be neutral, and then you're working against me. You should, in fact, the day I'm sworn in as president, you should just tender your resignation letter. You don't need to wait for me to sack you. That's the way it works. Because you see, it's politics. You cannot work against a particular interest and still want to benefit from that interest. Yeah, you might be like, oh, I'm just doing my job. Yes, be fair when you're doing your job. Do the right thing when you're doing your job. As a matter of fact, during the campaigns, I saw it clearly where that team was saying this man has taken X amount of money to PDP. Yes, you came into during PDP's time. You're the second longest serving CBN governor, and then you became so biased. Emefiele's problem started from the day he was contesting for president as a sitting CBN governor. Who does that? And I don't blame him. It's the president. We saw how Buhari was so docile. Nothing concerns him. He never got interested in anything. You were sitting as a CBN governor. We saw your branded cars for your campaign as the sitting president, and you are still sitting there on that seat. The day I'm sworn in as president, you should have just tendered your resignation letter. You shouldn't be waiting for anybody. And the day they said, oh, they arrested him, I was asking someone, I said, well, I hope they have checked all the legal, things around this arrest and all of that. He said, no, that they have it authority that he was already making plans to jet out of Nigeria. And that's why the DSS had to do that. We saw all manner of drama playing out. One, the DSS has accused him of something. Under the same president that appointed the two of them, the DG of the DSS is saying this, the cabal are backing the CBN governor to say this is not going to happen. They were running all around to arrest him. We saw how at the point he escaped. Then he said, oh, he's on sabbatical leave, came back to the country, and all of a sudden they've arranged for military to start following him all around the place so that the DSS won't gain access to him. You see, this is a message to quite a lot of people who are holding some positions to know that the day of reckoning is always coming.
Okay, but Bawa's situation, people are saying that perhaps it's because of, the allegations from Matawale and other people. So it's like maybe this administration is favoring some people that Bawa is already going after. Could that be the situation? Because it's like, it's looking like when we talk about Emefiele, we're seeing, yes, Emefiele has a lot of things against him, but Bawa not so, because people are just saying the allegation is stating abuse of power, abuse of office, but there is no detail of what he's been accused of. So could it be that it's because Bawa is, at the neck of some people that this administration might favor?
Just in addition to what her question, some people are of the opinion that the reason why he was suspended also is because he was the brain behind the Naira swap policy and the Naira redesign policy as well.
Oh, well, okay, let me start with what you said. I don't know, I don't have details about that because the Naira swap and all of that, I thought it should have been the purview of the CBN, So, but you see, the two of them, they were working hand in hand. That's the thing. And I'm sure by the time they started throwing to the public some of these allegations that they have against them, because both of them have been on the radar of the DSS for quite some times. You understand? And they are being shielded by some powers. I even thought Ab Initio should have been the EFCC that is investigating the CBN governor. You understand? But, you know, because they belong to the same cabal, so they don't even check each other's books anyway. But beyond that, I think it's high time for the government to actually look into the activities of the EFCC itself. You see, once you become a EFCC chairman, you have become a billionaire. We saw his last trip to Hajj, how he expended about $300,000 on just hotels. How? You're a public officer. Who does that? And they went to the hotel, dig all the payment and all of that. Who does that?
And you won't deny that they actually get a lot of favors as well.
That's corruption. You understand? So that in itself means you can't be investigated. You see, we should go beyond all these winch hunt or no winch hunt. He who wants to go to equity should go with clean hands. That should be the first thing. But when you yourself, you have, you know, soil your hands and all of that, and then somebody else is trying to check your books, and then you're crying that it's witch hunt. No, let it be that you have lived above board such that when they check your books, you are not even afraid to say, go and check, go and investigate, but not to be saying, crying that it's witch hunt. Did you actually committed those offenses? This should have been the question.
All right, let's come back to you, Mr. Fadik. By now, leadership succession at the EFCC has actually been steeped with controversies since its inception in 2003. You know, from Farida Waziri to Magwa, and now we're seeing, you know, Bawa. Now, what is the implication of these controversies on the fight against corruption? A lot of people actually seem to think that it's because, you know, the EFCC has actually been politicized. This is the reason why there's so many controversies.
Well, I don't know what... I don't want to guess what people mean by the word politicized. But if it is intended to mean that it is bias, then that is bad. But it is impossible to remove politics from any system all over the world. What you must try to do is to insulate against lopsidedness or bias. Because the process of bringing about that institution itself is a political process. Going to the National Assembly, asking for approval or approval of the National Assembly to appoint A, B, C, D. All of them are political processes. The beauty of it is that you are not unilateral about it. The difference between democracy and military rule is the dictatorship of the minority and the dictatorship of the majority. Otherwise, the two of them are dictatorship. One is dictating with the gun and the other is dictating with the law. But you see, the beauty of democracy is that all of us have sat down to agree that we will be guided by these laws. Now, in terms of the controversies that have surrounded the headship of this very, very strategic institution, it's not unexpected. I mean, because they are looking for what people are hiding. I mean, that is one cross that journalists carry today. And from the beginning of the profession anyway, there is this case, I can't remember the man's name now, that was killed in one embassy in is it Saudi Arabia or where? But the point I'm trying to make is that journalists look for facts that people don't want the public to know about. The same thing with the EFCC, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. Crimes are things done in the secret. The EFCC wants to bring it out. The man who has committed a crime doesn't want to be exposed. So he will fight back with all the powers, all the resources at his disposal. If the person that is put there is somebody that he thinks for any reason is likely to be upright, to do the right thing, to do according to law, yet he doesn't want the law to operate, he will do everything to make sure that he fights him. So it's not surprising that that place has become controversial. However, it is also very, very important for whoever is put at the helm of affairs to ensure that it doesn't fall into that trap.
All right, just a quick follow-up. You talked about going through the National Assembly.
Yes.
Now, to get, you know, the
approval, yes.
Now, do you think it is right for the president to suspend the chairman without passing through the National Assembly?
Now, specifically for the EFCC, I looked through the provision of the Establishment Act, and I didn't see anything that says the president has. I didn't see the word suspend, frankly, and I didn't also see anything that says the president has to go back to the National Assembly to ask for permission to suspend. But in section 171 of the Constitution, it says the president can appoint and remove ministers and certain categories of people, and it mentions extra ministerial departments. So you want to question the interpretation of that word extra ministerial department. Is EFCC an extra ministerial department? I think very strongly that that is the correct interpretation, barring what the courts will say, because I'm not a court. The court is the only one that is legally empowered to be able to say this is the mind of the drafter of the law. But on the face of it, using the literal interpretation principle in law, you can say that the president can appoint and remove the EFCC chairman or any other person. And in any case, for the let's even do some logical thinking. Why should I be able to appoint and I'm not able to remove? That's one. Two, if you say that I need to first of all go back to the National Assembly to seek permission, what if it is a period when the National Assembly is on vacation and there is a matter of national urgency? The position of the EFCC chairman, the position of the central bank governor, and some other positions in this country, we must understand are security positions. When they are doing certain things, because they have access to certain information that you and I cannot come across ordinarily on the street like that. They keep the skeleton. They know who is buried in the burial ground, in the cemetery. They know the one that has been freshly buried. They know the one that had been buried for several years. With criminal proceedings, there is no end to it. Any day the state is ready to prosecute, the state can bring out the evidence, and the only problem is whether the witnesses will have sufficient memory to recall those events that took place, because they also need to come and testify in court. So what am I trying to say? Even if the EFCC Act does not expressly provide for the removal of the EFCC chairman, which is unlike that of the central bank. That of the central bank says the president can remove based on 2/3 majority of the Senate, but that provision is not there. However, the Constitution and any other law, they have class. There is category. The Constitution says I am supreme to every other law, and any law that is contrary to my provision or inconsistent with my provision is null and void to the extent of that inconsistency. The EFCC Act is a subsidiary legislation, by which we mean that it is inferior, for the purpose of this conversation, it is inferior in authority and power to the Constitution. Whatever the Constitution says prevails over what the EFCC Act has said. If the EFCC Act has not said that the president can remove the chairman, the Constitution says certain people, and luckily enough, that omnibus provision is there. Even though it did not say EFCC is an extra ministerial department, the fact remains that there are people that the Constitution allows the president to appoint as his own staff, and it is the president that appoints him as his own staff, subject although to the approval of the Senate. So from that perspective, the EFCC chairman can be removed, but he didn't even remove him. He didn't remove him. He said, I have suspended him.
But is there a difference, though?
Well, there is a difference.
I think the former, the predecessors of Bauer, it was all in this guise of the suspension. But you never returned to the seat.
It's purely it's a legal safeguard.
Exactly.
Because it could. I mean, I saw one or two posts in the social media where Bauer was alleged to have said, Mr. President, your presidency is still being contested in court, therefore you don't have the power to suspend me. I mean, you know, the social media, that's one, the big problem is that it has no gate, so anything goes in there. I don't believe in that one. But assuming without considering that he said so, he doesn't even have the mouth to say so.
Right. Samaila, quick one. DSS are the one handling this case, you know, currently. And Nigerians are thinking that considering they have a bad blood between the DSS and the EFCC with the building ownership, you know, fighting in Lagos. Yes, so people are already thinking that perhaps they should take it. What is your take on that?
That perhaps we should take
They should take the case away from the DSS.
Yes. Well, you see, the point is, the DSS has been the one investigating those people. When there are allegations that the CBN governor was also financing some terrorism and all of that, I'm sure they had their facts, because I was involved with some Bureau de Change guys through their associations. Some of them, they were arrested, you know, both in Dubai and in Kano and here in Abuja, that they were using them to fund terrorism in northern Nigeria. And we tried to intervene. And the DG of the DSS told us categorically that these allegations have also been passed to the DMI, that's the Directorate of Military Intelligence, that the facts they have against these guys, that whoever tried to bring them out is an enemy of this country. You understand? That they should back out. Now, the CBN governor was also alleged to have been involved in some of those things, but there are powers shielding him from being arrested at that time. Those guys are still in the DMI now. In fact, they moved them from the DSS to the DMI office. So those facts are so damning that there's no way anybody could have tried to intervene in that situation. If you ask the DSS to back down, who would you hand over this issue to?
That will be equal to the tax. Nobody.
You get what I'm saying? Because that's part of their job as well, especially when it has to do with security issues beyond. I mean, are you going to take it back to the Nigerian police to start which investigation, because they were not the one who discovered it ab initio? You understand? Okay. So you should know, if the DSS is actually on top of their game, they have found out how funds are being moved, which is part of what their job description is, and then they move into action. Now, the issue of whether because they had you know, some issues and all of that, is for them to also know. I'm talking about whoever is becoming the next what's it called, EFCC chairman and the likes. Let them always try to, because I know there's so much rivalry among all the top security agencies, to find a way and work hand in hand moving this country forward, rather than witch hunting each other. No, this one is not your own, this one is my own, and it's all on corruption issues, because everybody wants to make money from it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Samaila. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for, you know, your analysis on this particular issue. It was quite an interesting one. We hope to have you here, you know, some other time. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so that was Bode Fadigbe, Esquire, and Samaila Musa, a public commentator, discussing the EFCC chairman's suspension, you know, with us in the studio. And with that, we've come to the end of Daybreak this beautiful morning. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Darshan Hussaina Usman.
And I am Sumaya Abubakar. Thank you so much for staying with us. And don't go anywhere. Adeni Ajishafe will be coming in with the sport news. Stay with us.